I sat in that courtroom, watching my biological parents smile at each other, certain they had won. David leaned back in his chair, arms crossed like he owned the place. Linda dabbed at fake tears with a tissue, playing the grieving daughter. The judge held my grandma Margaret's will in her hands, reading page after page of legal language that sounded like victory for them. My heart hammered against my ribs. 3 weeks ago, I buried the only mother I ever knew. Now these strangers who abandoned me 22 years ago wanted to take everything she left behind. $4.85 million. They had not come to the funeral to mourn. They came to claim. The judge's fingers gripped the corner of page 3, about to turn it. Everything I had left of Grandma Margaret's love hung on whatever came next. Before I tell you how that next page destroyed their greedy smiles and gave me the justice Grandma planned all along, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. And if you believe that real family is built on love, not just blood, go ahead and hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel because this story proves that the people who truly love you will protect you even from beyond the grave. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare really began, to a September morning in 2002 when I learned what abandonment felt like. I was 6 years old, wearing my favorite red striped shirt and those light-up dinosaur shoes that blinked when I walked. I remember every detail of that morning because it was the last normal breakfast I ever had with my parents. Grandma Margaret had made scrambled eggs and toast at her house. We were visiting for the weekend or so, I thought. I sat at her kitchen table, swinging my legs that did not quite reach the floor, watching Dad load suitcases into their car through the window. My blue backpack sat by the door, packed for what they told me was a trip to the lake. Mom was on her phone in the living room, laughing at something, not even looking my way. I remember thinking she looked pretty that day. I wanted her to notice my dinosaur shoes to see how they lit up, but she never turned around. Grandma Margaret stood at the stove, her back to me, but I could see her shoulders tense. She wore her usual floral apron, the one with yellow sunflowers. The kitchen smelled like butter and coffee. Dad came back inside, kissed the top of my head without really looking at me, and said they would be back Monday. Mom waved from the doorway, still on her phone, and said to be good for Grandma. Then they left. I waited by the window all day Monday, then Tuesday, then the rest of that week. Grandma's face changed when the phone call came on Friday evening. I watched her expression shift from confusion to something that looked like rage, then collapse into deep sorrow. She hung up, stood there gripping the counter, then knelt down in front of me. I asked when Mommy was coming back. She pulled me into her arms, held me so tight I could barely breathe, and whispered, "Baby, you are staying with Grandma now. Forever." I did not understand what forever meant. Not then. Margaret Sullivan became my whole world after that day. She was 58 years old, a retired elementary school teacher with gray hair she always wore in a neat bun. Her small house in suburban Portland, Oregon, had a garden bursting with tomato plants and rose bushes that she tended every morning. She smelled like vanilla extract and cinnamon scents that still make me feel safe even now. Every single morning for the next 22 years, she made me breakfast. Pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse on Saturdays, oatmeal with honey and raisins on school mornings. She walked me to school, holding my small hand in hers, her grip gentle but secure. She helped me with homework at that same kitchen table where I ate eggs the day my parents left, teaching me multiplication tables with patient repetition when I got frustrated. She read to me every night before bed, Where the Wild Things Are when I was little, Charlotte's Web when I got older. Her voice made the characters real, made me forget that other kids had two parents, and I only had her. When I learned to ride a bike, she ran beside me through the neighborhood out of breath and laughing, refusing to let go of the seat until I begged her to. When I finally pedaled on my own, she cheered so loud the neighbors came outside. My first day of middle school, she cried more than I did, fixing my collar 17 times before finally letting me get on the bus. High school graduation, she sat in the front row, cheering the loudest when they called my name. When my college acceptance letter arrived from Portland State University, we danced around her kitchen like lunatics. What I did not know then was the sacrifice behind every single one of those moments. She worked part-time at the local library shelving books and helping patrons just to afford my school supplies and clothes. She saved every penny she could for my college fund. I remember her buying me new sneakers when mine wore through while she kept wearing the same old pair she had owned for years. She made my favorite meals, pot roast and mashed potatoes, even during months when I later learned money was tight. She never complained. She just smiled and told me I was growing so fast she could barely keep up. The inheritance everyone would fight over years later came from a place of her careful planning and incredible luck. My grandfather, her husband, had died before I was born. He left her a modest life insurance policy, about $300,000. Most people would have spent it, lived comfortably, maybe traveled. Grandma Margaret invested it instead. She bought small rental properties in Portland in the early 2000s, just a couple of houses in neighborhoods people said would never appreciate. But Portland's real estate market exploded between 2010 and 2020. Those modest investments turned into prime real estate. By 2024, her estate was worth $4.85 million. She lived in that same small house, drove the same old Honda, wore the same floral aprons. She never touched the growth. Every decision she made was for my future, for the security she wanted me to have. I did not know the extent of it until much later. I just knew she always had enough to take care of me, to send me to college, to make sure I never felt the lack my parents created when they walked away. I graduated college with a business degree in 2018. Got my first real job at a marketing firm in downtown Portland. Grandma Margaret cried happy tears the day I brought home my first paycheck, even though it was modest. She framed my college diploma and hung it in her living room where everyone could see it. She was proud. Not because of what I achieved, but because I had become a good person despite everything. Then late in 2023, everything changed. She started feeling tired all the time, lost weight, went to the doctor thinking it was just age catching up. The diagnosis came back like a punch to the gut. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors gave her maybe 6 months. I was 28 years old, working 60-hour weeks at a job I did not even like, and none of it mattered anymore. I took family leave, quit caring about my career, and moved back to Portland. Back to that small house with the garden and the floral aprons. I became her caretaker. Daily medications, doctor's visits, hospital stays that grew longer each time. Her body weakened, but her spirit stayed strong. We had long conversations about life and love and legacy during those months. She held my hand and told me stories about my grandfather, about raising my mom Linda, about the day I came into her life and gave her purpose again. In December of 2023, she updated her will. Her lawyer, Ms. Anderson, came to the house. I was there, but Grandma asked me to step out while they talked through the details. I did not push. I trusted her completely. When Ms. Anderson left, Grandma called me back into the living room. She looked tired but determined. She said, "Roger, everything I have is yours. You earned it with your love." I told her I did not want to talk about it, that she was going to be fine, all the lies we tell when we cannot face losing someone. She just smiled that patient smile and made me promise to trust her, to let her handle things her way. February 14th, 2024. Valentine's Day. She was in hospice by then, her body finally giving up the fight. I sat beside her bed, holding her hand, watching her breathe, memorizing every line of her face. Her last words to me were whispered, barely audible. "You were the greatest gift of my life." Then she was gone. The funeral was small. Close friends, neighbors who had watched me grow up, a few former students of hers from teaching days. I gave a eulogy and barely made it through. Told stories of her kindness, her sacrifice, her unwavering love. Everyone cried. We buried her on a gray February afternoon in a cemetery on the east side of Portland, under a sky that threatened rain but never delivered. The mourners filtered away slowly, offering condolences, hugs, promises to check on me. I stood alone by her fresh grave, staring at the temporary marker, numb with grief. Then I heard a car door close behind me. I turned and saw a black sedan parked on the cemetery road. Two people got out. A man and a woman, both in their mid-50s, dressed in black. It took me a moment to recognize them. 22 years changes faces. David looked older, grayer, his hairline receding. Linda had aged 2 lines around her eyes, but she had clearly tried to fight it with careful makeup and highlights. Linda spoke first, her voice uncertain. "Roger, it is us. Your parents." I stood frozen. I could not form words. The shock paralyzed every muscle. David stepped forward but kept his distance. "We heard about Margaret. We are so sorry for your loss." They did not hug me, did not reach out. Just stood there like strangers offering sympathy at a funeral for someone they barely knew, which I suppose described us perfectly. Linda cleared her throat. "We know this is difficult timing, but we need to talk. About the estate." My stomach dropped. Just like that, I understood. They were not here to mourn the woman who raised their abandoned son. They were not here to apologize for 22 years of silence. They were here for money. 2 days later, I was sitting in Grandma's house, sorting through her belongings, trying to figure out how to exist in a world without her when the mail arrived. Among the sympathy cards and bills was a thick legal envelope. I opened it with shaking hands. Notice of inheritance claim. David and Linda had filed a legal claim to Grandma Margaret's estate. Their argument was simple and brutal. Linda was Margaret's biological daughter, the only child. As next of kin, they argued they had legal rights to the inheritance. The document was filled with legal jargon, but the message was clear. They wanted the $4.85 million. I called Ms. Anderson immediately, my voice shaking with rage I could barely contain. She asked me to come to her office that afternoon. Her office was in a historic building in downtown Portland, all dark wood and leather furniture. Ms. Anderson was a woman in her early 60s, sharp-eyed and compassionate. She had been Grandma's lawyer for over 15 years. She sat across from me reviewing the claim with a calm expression that somehow made me feel slightly better. Oregon inheritance law can be complicated when estranged family members are involved. She explained, her fingers steepled under her chin. But Roger, your grandmother was one of the smartest women I have ever known. She smiled slightly, a hint of something I could not quite read. She anticipated this exact scenario. We spent months making sure you were protected. But can they actually win? I asked. They abandoned me. They have not been part of my life for over 2 decades. That is where things get interesting, Ms. Anderson said. I cannot reveal all the details yet. The court date is set for March 15th. But trust me when I say your grandmother thought of everything. That gave me a sliver of hope, but the next month was absolute hell. David and Linda started appearing everywhere. I would go to my usual coffee shop on Hawthorne Boulevard, and they would be there sitting in a corner booth. Coincidence, they claimed. They started trying to talk to me, corner me into conversations I did not want to have. Linda played the emotional manipulation card. We made mistakes, Roger. We were young and stupid, but we are still your parents. Blood is blood. David tried a different approach. Margaret would not want family fighting like this. She was always about forgiveness and love, right? The hypocrisy made me physically ill. They had hired an expensive lawyer too, Mr. Harrison Thompson, from one of Portland's biggest law firms. I saw their strategy clearly. Appear conciliatory and remorseful in public while being vicious in their legal filings. Paint themselves as the wronged family trying to reconnect with a grandson who had been turned against them. I could not sleep. Nightmares filled with images of 6-year-old me waiting by that window, waiting for parents who never came back. I felt anger burning in my chest every waking moment. Fear, too. What if they actually won? What if some judge decided blood relation mattered more than 2 decades of abandonment? I went through Grandma's belongings, looking for comfort, anything to feel close to her. I found her journals in a drawer of her bedside table, recent ones from the last few years. I read them late at night, crying at her handwriting, her voice coming through the pages. One entry from February 1st, 2024, just 2 weeks before she died, stopped me cold. Saw the lawyer again today. Updated everything one final time. Roger is protected now. They cannot hurt him. I made absolutely sure. If Linda and David come crawling back after I am gone, they will learn that love builds stronger walls than blood ever could. My friend Marcus drove down from Seattle the weekend before the court date. We had been roommates in college, best friends since freshman year. He sat in Grandma's kitchen with me drinking beer, trying to calm my nerves. Dude, they abandoned you when you were 6. Marcus said, his voice firm. No court is going to side with them. It is insane they are even trying. Money makes people do insane things, I replied. My coworker Sarah, who had a background in law before switching to marketing, helped me understand the legal process. She warned me that blood relation could be powerful in court, especially in inheritance cases. She told me to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. I spent hours researching David and Linda online, digging through social media public records, anything I could find. David had remarried and lived in Sacramento, California. He had 2 other kids, teenagers now. My half-siblings I never knew existed. Linda was divorced from David, had been for years. She lived in Reno, Nevada, working as a realtor. Neither of them looked like they were struggling financially. They just wanted more. That made it worse somehow. If they had been desperate, struggling, maybe I could have understood the audacity. But they were fine. They just saw an opportunity and took it. March 15th, 2024 arrived like an execution date. I woke up at 5 in the morning, my stomach in knots. I could not eat breakfast. I put on the only suit I owned, a navy blue one Grandma had bought me 3 years ago for job interviews. It still smelled faintly like her fabric softener. I drove to the Multnomah County Courthouse through light Portland, rain the kind that is barely more than mist, but soaks you anyway. Ms. Anderson met me on the courthouse steps. She squeezed my hand and said, "Trust the process. Trust your grandmother." The courtroom was small wood paneling on the walls, fluorescent lights overhead. Judge Patricia Henley presided, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression that gave nothing away. David and Linda were already seated with Mr. Thompson when I walked in. They had dressed expensively. Linda wore a designer black dress and pearls. David had on a tailored charcoal suit. They looked polished, prepared, confident. Linda gave me a sad smile when our eyes met, like she pitied me. David nodded as if we were equals meeting for a business transaction. My hands shook as I sat down next to Ms. Anderson. Judge Henley called the court to order. Mr. Thompson stood to present their case. He was good, I had to admit. Smooth, professional, persuasive. Your Honor, my clients are the biological parents of the deceased Margaret Sullivan's daughter, Linda Brennan. Ms. Brennan is Mrs. Sullivan's only child, her sole biological heir. While there was an unfortunate estrangement in the family many years ago, the legal facts are clear. Under Oregon statutes governing intestate succession and inheritance rights, my clients have legal standing as the rightful heirs to Mrs. Sullivan's estate. He presented birth certificates, marriage licenses, family records, everything documented and official. He used careful language to minimize what they had done, called it an unfortunate estrangement instead of child abandonment. Painted them as family members who had drifted apart, not parents who walked away from their 6-year-old son. While Mrs. Sullivan was certainly generous and loving in caring for her grandson during this period, generosity does not override legal rights. Mr. Roger Sullivan, while undoubtedly loved by his grandmother, is not a legally adopted child. He is a grandson. The estate should rightfully pass to the direct biological heir, my client, Ms. Linda Brennan. I watched Linda wipe away what looked like a tear. David reached over and patted her hand. They were performing grief and remorse, and they were decent actors. My heart sank. They sounded convincing. They looked sympathetic. What if the judge believed them? I glanced at Ms. Anderson. She sat calmly, almost amused, taking notes. Her lack of panic confused me, but also gave me the tiniest thread of hope. Judge Henley turned to her. Ms. Anderson, your response? Ms. Anderson stood slowly buttoning her jacket. Her movements were deliberate, confident. She looked at the judge with steady eyes. Your Honor, I appreciate Mr. Thompson's presentation. He is correct about certain facts. Linda Brennan is indeed the biological daughter of Margaret Sullivan. Roger Sullivan is indeed the biological grandson. However, there are critical elements that my colleague has conveniently omitted from his argument. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. My heart started racing. She handed copies to the judge, to Mr. Thompson, and to me. The will. Several pages typed, dated, notarized. Judge Henley began reading aloud. Standard opening. Identification of Margaret Sullivan as the testator, sound of mind. List of assets. Properties on Division Street, Belmont, Hawthorne. Bank accounts. Investment portfolios. Total estimated value $4.85 million. Then the bequest section. Page 3. I leave my entire estate to... David and Linda both sat up straighter. Linda's hands gripped the table edge. David leaned back with his arms crossed, a satisfied expression creeping onto his face. They thought they had won. They had already spent this money in their minds. New house, new cars, early retirement, whatever fantasy they had built. I felt sick watching them. Then Judge Henley continued reading. I leave my entire estate to my beloved grandson, Roger Sullivan, who has been not only my grandson by blood, but my son by choice, by love, and by legal right. Linda's smile faltered. Mr. Thompson opened his mouth to object. Your Honor, without legal adoption, this language is simply sentimental, but does not override. Judge Henley held up her hand. Counsel, let me finish. She turned the page. This was it. The moment from the title, from the thumbnail. the page that would end everything. Time seemed to slow down. David and Linda stopped breathing. The courtroom went silent except for the rustling of paper. Judge Henley's eyes scanned page 4. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Then she began reading aloud, her voice clear and deliberate. Attached as Exhibit A is the final adoption decree from the Multnomah County Circuit Court, dated October 15, 2002, granting full legal adoption of minor child Roger David Sullivan to Margaret Ann Sullivan. All parental rights of biological parents, David Michael Brennan and Linda Marie Brennan, were terminated as part of this decree. Said parents were notified and consented to termination in exchange for release from all financial obligations, including child support. The color drained from Linda's face. David's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch. Mr. Thompson frantically flipped through the documents, his professional composure cracking. Ms. Anderson stood and addressed the court. Your Honor, Mrs. Sullivan pursued legal adoption of Roger exactly 6 months after his biological parents abandoned him at her home in September of 2002. She documented their neglect, their refusal to return, their complete absence from his life. When contacted by her attorney, both Mr. Brennan and Ms. Brennan willingly signed termination of parental rights. They wanted no financial responsibility for their son. Mrs. Sullivan wanted only to protect him and give him legal security. She walked forward and submitted additional documents to the judge. Originals with the Oregon State Seal. Signatures from a judge dated 2002. David and Linda's signatures on termination papers, clear as day. Roger Sullivan is not merely Margaret Sullivan's grandson, Ms. Anderson continued. He is legally her adopted son, has been for 22 years. Every legal right, every protection, every privilege that comes with that relationship has been his since he was 6 years old. My clients have no claim whatsoever to this estate. They terminated their own rights decades ago. Judge Henley examined the documents carefully. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat. Linda's hands were shaking. David stared at the table, his face red. But Ms. Anderson was not finished. She was building a wall they could never climb. Your Honor, I would also like to submit additional evidence demonstrating the relationship between Mrs. Sullivan and Roger Sullivan over the past 22 years. She presented files thick with papers, school records listing Margaret Sullivan as legal guardian and parent, medical records spanning 2 decades, tax returns claiming Roger as a dependent every single year, college financial aid forms with Margaret listed as his mother, birthday cards, report cards, photographs, teacher evaluations. Then she presented character letters, statements from Roger's teachers over the years, all testifying to Margaret's devotion, neighbors who witnessed her raising him, family friends who saw him thrive under her care. Finally, she pulled out a single sheet of paper. This is a letter Mrs. Sullivan wrote 1 month before her death. She asked me to read it in court if this situation ever arose. She knew they might come. She wanted them to hear this. Ms. Anderson's voice softened, but remained strong as she read. To whom it may concern in the event of legal challenge to my will. My name is Margaret Sullivan, and I am writing this in January of 2024, knowing my time is short. My daughter Linda and her ex-husband David abandoned their son when he was 6 years old. They chose their freedom over their child. I chose Roger. Every single day for 22 years, I chose him. I chose to wake up early and make him breakfast. I chose to walk him to school. I chose to sit through parent-teacher conferences and soccer games and choir concerts. I chose to save money for his college instead of spending it on myself. I chose to adopt him legally so he would never feel unwanted again. This inheritance is not blood money. It is love money. Every dollar represents a sacrifice I made gladly. Every property represents security I wanted him to have. It belongs to the boy I raised, the man I am proud of, the son of my heart. Roger earned every penny through his devotion, his care, his love for me. If Linda and David are reading this, know that I forgave you long ago for what you did. But forgiveness does not mean rewarding your cruelty. Roger is my heir. Legally, morally, completely. And if you are in that courtroom trying to take what belongs to him, I hope you feel the shame you should have felt 22 years ago when you walked away from your beautiful boy. Ms. Anderson folded the letter. I was crying openly now, not even trying to hide it. The courtroom was silent. Even Judge Henley's eyes looked damp. David stared at the table, his face a mask I could not read. Linda's makeup was running from real tears, now tears of shame, not performance. Judge Henley took a long breath. I have heard enough. The evidence is overwhelming and conclusive. The will of Margaret Sullivan is valid, legal, and supported by 22 years of documentation. Mr. Roger Sullivan is the legal adopted son and sole heir of the deceased. The claim filed by Mr. David Brennan and Ms. Linda Brennan is denied in its entirety. This court is adjourned. The gavel strike sounded like thunder. Mr. Thompson gathered his papers, his face red with embarrassment at being so thoroughly unprepared. David stood first, grabbed Linda's arm roughly, and pulled her toward the exit. At the door, Linda glanced back at me one time. Our eyes met. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something. But what could she possibly say? They left. I never saw them again. I sat there in the empty courtroom, unable to move. Ms. Anderson put her hand on my shoulder. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. I knotted my throat too tight to speak. She saved me, I finally managed to whisper. Twice. Once when I was 6. And now. Ms. Anderson smiled. She loved you more than anything in this world. That love just protected you one final time. I was free. Free from their claim. Free from their manipulation. Free from the fear that they could take away what Grandma had built for me. The weeks after the verdict blurred together. April arrived with spring blooms all over Portland. I returned to Grandma's house, my house now, and sat in her garden. The cherry blossom tree she had planted when I was 8 was in full bloom, pink petals falling like snow. I felt numb at first. Then waves of grief would hit me randomly. I would be fine, and then I would smell vanilla and break down crying. I would see her floral apron hanging in the kitchen and feel like my chest was caving in. But alongside the grief was overwhelming gratitude. She had planned everything. Not just the money, though that was significant. She had built a legal fortress around me to protect me from the exact cruelty she knew might come. Her final act of love was making sure David and Linda could never hurt me again. I met with a financial advisor in late April. The estate transfer went through smoothly. $4.85 million. Properties, investments, security for the rest of my life and beyond. But I did not want to just sit on it. That would dishonor her memory. I quit my corporate marketing job. It had never fulfilled me anyway. I started making different choices. I kept Grandma's house and moved back in permanently. I learned to garden, spending mornings tending her tomato plants and roses. Her hobbies became mine. I found peace in the soil and watching things grow. I donated $500,000 to children's advocacy organizations, specifically groups that helped kids in foster care or being raised by relatives. I established the Margaret Sullivan Scholarship Fund, at Portland State University with a $1 million endowment. It would provide full scholarships to students being raised by their grandparents, kids like me who found love in unexpected places. I took one of the rental properties and renovated it into affordable housing, specifically for single grandparents raising grandchildren. Subsidized rent support services, community. The things Grandma would have wanted. I started therapy to process the abandonment trauma I had carried for decades. Joined a support group for adult children of abandonment. Met others with similar stories. Realized I was not alone. Found peace gradually, slowly, in fits and starts. I reconnected with Marcus, who drove down from Seattle every few weeks, just to check on me. Sarah, my coworker, who had helped me through the legal nightmare, and I started dating. She understood my journey. Our relationship was built on trust, not biology. On choice, not obligation. 1 year later, February 14th, 2025, I drove to the cemetery. It was raining proper Portland rain, not just mist. I brought roses, her favorite, and stood at her grave. The headstone I had commissioned was in place now. It read, Margaret Sullivan, beloved mother and grandmother. I had added mother myself. She earned that title. She deserved that recognition. I talked to her like she could hear me, told her about the scholarship recipients, about the kids we were helping, about Sarah, about therapy, about learning to garden, about how her love had changed everything. Thank you, I said out loud, rain soaking through my jacket. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for the inheritance, but not the money. The real inheritance was knowing that I was worth loving, worth protecting, worth fighting for even after you were gone. Family is not who shares your DNA. Family is who shows up, who stays when it gets hard, who sacrifices, who protects you even from beyond the grave. Grandma Margaret was my real mother. She earned that title every single day for 22 years. David and Linda never reached out again. No apology, no explanation. I do not need it anymore. I released the anger somewhere between the courtroom and that first spring in her garden. Not forgiveness exactly, just indifference. They are strangers who happen to create me biologically. Nothing more. They have no power over me now. I left the cemetery as the rain slowed. Looked back at her headstone one more time. The flowers I brought were already collecting water in their petals. I got in my car and drove back toward the life she made possible. Some people spend their whole lives searching for family. I was lucky. Family found me when I was 6 years old and unwanted. Chose me when I was abandoned. Loved me when I felt unlovable. Protected me even in death. The $4.85 million did not make me rich. Her love did that years before the money ever mattered. As I drove through Portland streets, slick with rain past the neighborhoods where her properties stood, I finally understood what she had been teaching me all along. Inheritance is not just what you leave behind in a will. It is what you build in a heart. And Grandma Margaret left me the richest inheritance of all. The knowledge that I was worth choosing. That lesson no one could ever take it away. If this story touched your heart, drop a comment and tell me. Have you ever had someone choose you when others walked away? Share your story below because I know I am not the only one who found family in unexpected places. Hit that like button if you believe love is stronger than blood. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories about the power of chosen family and second chances. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they are worthy of real love. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that the people who truly matter will move heaven and earth to protect you. May you all find your own Margaret Sullivan, or better yet, may you be that person for someone else. Take care of yourselves and the people who chose to love you,